On my first day at a new job, I saw my wife's photo framed on my boss's desk. Holding back my shock, I calmly asked, "Who is that woman?" He smiled and answered something I never imagined I'd hear. He said, "That's my sister. We haven't spoken in 11 years. I went completely still. My wife had told me she was an only child. Not once, not in passing. She had looked me in the eyes on our third date and said it directly. I'd asked because I was close with my own siblings and I wanted to know what her family was like. She said her parents were gone and she had no one else. I held her hand across the table and told her I was sorry. I meant it. That was 14 years ago. I didn't react in his office. I nodded, said something about a nice photo, moved the conversation forward. He was warm about it, said they'd had a falling out a long time back. Family stuff. Left it at that. I smiled and we got through the rest of the meeting. I shook his hand on the way out. My grip was steady. The drive home took 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock the entire time and didn't turn on the radio. I just needed to think before I walked through that door and became a person who didn't know anything yet. She was in the kitchen when I got in. Pasta on the stove, something with garlic. She asked how the first day went and I said, "Good, long, a lot of names to remember." She laughed and said, "That's always the hardest part." I set my bag down and sat at the kitchen island and watched her cook and thought about the word sister sitting somewhere inside my chest like a stone I didn't know what to do with yet. We ate dinner. I asked about her day. She'd had a meeting that ran long, a coworker who was driving her crazy. Nothing new. I listened. I nodded. I refilled her water without being asked. I was good at being normal that night. I surprised myself. After she fell asleep, I went to the closet in the hallway where we keep the box. It's a shoebox, technically. Brown with a rubber band around it. She'd had it since before we met. Early on, I'd asked what was in it, and she said old stuff. Nothing interesting. I never pushed. I opened it on the kitchen counter with the light on low. Birthday cards, mostly. A few ticket stubs. A folded program from what looked like a middle school play. And near the bottom, a photograph, printed on the kind of glossy paper that meant it was old enough to be developed at a drugstore. Two teenagers standing in front of a Christmas tree. The girl was my wife, younger, maybe 15 or 16, but unmistakably her. The boy next to her was taller, maybe 17, arm around her shoulder, grinning at the camera. He had the same eyes as my boss. I stood there for a long time. Then I folded the photo back the way I'd found it, replaced everything in the box, put the rubber band back on, and returned it to the shelf. I didn't sleep much. The next morning at work, I waited until there was a natural moment. Mid-morning, coffee in hand, the kind of hallway conversation that doesn't mean anything. I mentioned that my wife had grown up pretty private, didn't talk much about family, just making conversation, testing. His whole face shifted, not dramatically. He was a composed person, but something moved behind his eyes. He said she'd had a hard time after their father died, said there'd been a disagreement about how things were handled, money and decisions and who did what, and she'd ended it. All of it. Just gone. He said he'd written her a letter 3 years ago, found an address online, sent it, didn't know if it was still current, never got a response. I knew that address. It was the house we'd lived in for 6 years. She had gotten that letter and never told me. Maybe she'd thrown it away the day it arrived. Maybe it was in a drawer somewhere. Either way, she had made a choice, and that choice had included me without my knowing. I went home that evening and asked her to sit down. I told her where I was working. I told her his name. I watched her face move through several things at once. Recognition, then something close to panic, then a stillness that looked like a decision being made in real time. She didn't deny it. She didn't try to construct a story. She just looked down at her hands on the table and started crying quietly. She said she'd been ashamed, that the fight had been ugly and she'd said things she couldn't take back, and by the time she might have wanted to reach out, it had been so long that she didn't know how. She said she'd told me she was an only child because it was easier than explaining, and then it became the truth she lived with. She said she was sorry. I didn't say much. There wasn't a lot to say in that moment that would have helped. I picked up my phone, found his contact, and set it on the table in front of her. She stared at it for a long time, long enough that I wasn't sure she would. Then she picked it up and pressed call. I walked to the other side of the house to give her the room.